Hello there and welcome back to another CPD talk. My name's Jasmine and I am the lead for training in NKPS. So I have done a couple of different talks so far on IBMS qualifications. These have included the registration portfolio and the specialist portfolio. Today we're going to go a step further and look at the higher level IBMS qualifications. I do want to point out that I am going to go through the Certificate of Achievements in another talk, so if you are a band 2 or band 3 working in the lab and you're interested in that, please watch your space, they are coming. So what we're going to cover, we are going to go back over the general process of progression in biomedical science that was highlighted in the other portfolio talks, but obviously we're looking at it a bit differently this time. We're then going to go through the higher specialist diploma, the certificate of expert practice, what next, and then a thanks. The general process of progression in biomedical science. As mentioned in the Introduction to Portfolios Part 1, there are many methods of progression in the biomedical science career, and these are constantly changing. So just to highlight that this is up to date as of mid-2021. I would recommend checking if we're in 2022 to ensure that what I'm saying here is still correct. I've just got this same progression map as was in the other talk, and we're basically looking at going from a band 6 to a band 7. So that's here where you've got the big nice red spiky bubble. In the section highlighted, it's important to note that there are several qualifications and these are not all to do specifically with progression. So you've got the high specialist diploma, which can be used to advance from a band 6 to a 7, however can also be used to gain extra understanding in specific disciplines or leadership and management. The certificates of expert practice can be used to gain new roles that specialise in topics such as quality or training, or they can be used to enhance someone's knowledge who already holds a role where they are involved in these topics. And then there are also other courses offered by the Trust which help to develop staff in their roles. Again, these can be leadership and management, they can be to do with mentoring and coaching. If there's something you're interested in, I would highly recommend talking to your line manager because these are free courses that are done every year. So they're really easy to get onto and they can be very useful tools in your progression. As I said before, we're going to start with the High Specialist Diploma, which I'm going to shorten to HSD. The HSD is meant to be master's equivalent that enables biomedical and clinical scientists to demonstrate depth of knowledge of a chosen specialism within the wider professional context, which is normally required for senior roles. It is currently available for cellular pathology, clinical chemistry, cytopathology, hematology, immunology, leadership and management, medical microbiology, transfusion science, and virology. The award of the HSD shows that the candidate has demonstrated the following learning outcomes: a comprehensive understanding of a specific field of biomedical science, the ability to analyse and interpret information critically in order to address practice-based situations, skills in leadership and communication within the healthcare environment, critical reflection of personal professional practice, knowledge and understanding of current issues and developments within healthcare and how they impact on professional practice. So I've just gone through a lot of information there. The generalized theme of this is trying to show that as a senior, if that's the role that you're aiming for, you'll be able to deal with what is thrown at you day in, day out, whether it be something where you're dealing with document control and something that should be pretty bog standard, or you have some other staff members coming and finding you from the lab that need help with stuff. You should be able to think on your feet and adapt to that. And that's the point of this course, is to show that you can do that. There are a couple of different sections to the HSD. So the first bit is completing the portfolio. In order to be eligible for the HSD, you no longer have to have a minimum of 5 years post-registration experience before starting, because it's been recognised that people are being thrown into difficult situations earlier and earlier. All you have to do is to show that you are able to operate at the appropriate level, and through the completion of the portfolio and passing the exams, that you have the knowledge and competence to proceed to more senior roles. So technically you could start this straight after you finished your specialist portfolio, and you could do it within 3 years, like start it within 3 years of being qualified. In future, to undertake the HSD, applicants must simply be HCP registered and have paid membership at member or fellow grade, which must be maintained for the duration of this qualification. So member grade is after you've done your specialist portfolio. Fellow is either doing a master's, or this qualification will get you the fellow as well. The portfolio requirements. There are 2 stages to the award of the HSD. Candidates firstly submit a portfolio that must satisfy the examiners within their chosen discipline that they have met the standard required. The HSD group reviewed the current portfolio requirements and, based on their experience of marking portfolios, agreed that some changes need to happen. So there are a few changes that have happened this year. So hopefully this talk will be valid for the HSD for a little while, since it's only just gone through changes. So what you do with the portfolio is, first you have to create a 500-word personal profile that describes the professional experience, current job role and responsibilities of the candidate. Next, you have to do 2 case studies, one on a clinical issue and one on a managerial issue. Obviously, if you're doing the management and leadership, they'll both be on a managerial issue. Each must be 1,500 words, and it must be clear the level of personal involvement that the candidate has had, and whether a clinical case or a managerial report, they must demonstrate their systematic approach, show insight and a wider understanding of the condition or issue, current knowledge and relevance to their scope of practice. This is basically saying you have to do 2 cases, you have to have been involved in them, so you can't just pick an interesting case study that someone else has told you about that's happened in the lab. It has to be one that you have directly inputted to. So it might be that you have a case that is a bit more bog standard and not like an anti-U, for example, if you're in transfusion. But if you've shown that you've thought on your feet, if you've shown that you've done the leadership, that you understand the science behind it, that is still going to be a good case study. You then have to do 2 essays, each of 3,000 words, based on the titles on the IBMS website. So every year the IBMS will release some essay questions. There's normally 2 a year, and you select 2 from the list. You can select from the current year and the prior year. So you can either select 2 from one year or 1 from each year. It's up to you. You then have to do evidence of an oral presentation with feedback from appropriate colleagues. So this is normally 2 members of staff who are senior to you. And then finally, you have to do a reflective statement of 2,000 words that articulates how the candidate identified gaps in their knowledge, the actions they took to address these, and the rationale behind their choice of actions. It should also show how their preparation for the HSD has contributed to their professional practice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these sections together, and I've got some examples here. The first one we've got is professional profile. So just before we get started on this, on the IBMS website there is a study guide, and it has examples, pieces of work, as well as information about what you need to study for the exams. It says on there that I'm not allowed to distribute it without permission, so I've linked it in the description box below, but I can't have it on the actual talk. So what I've done instead is I recently completed the portfolio, which did pass, so I've included examples of some of my work for us to have a quick look at and just go through. So obviously this work is going to be relevant to the transfusion science higher specialist portfolio, because that is what I specialise in. However, the information is going to be applicable across the board, and the way that you tackle it will be the same. So the personal professional profile, I followed a very similar format to what was shown in the study guide. I started off by talking about the last big qualification that I did, which was the specialist, where I became a member with the IBMS. I then spoke about my advancement to being a senior biomedical scientist in the transfusion laboratory. I wrote this before I became training lead and didn't want to edit it afterwards, so that's not included in this. This is just about me being a senior in transfusion. And I spoke about how I had taken on extra responsibilities. I mentioned that I mainly do training, and I've basically just gone through what my everyday job is, what I try to do in the lab, and what I enjoy doing as well. So I say that I focus mostly on training, and that's the section that I enjoy over quality, although I do work in the quality part of the lab as well. I talk about how I've marked portfolios, and how people have become registered BMSs from them, and I've spoken about the big achievements that I've done up until that point, and basically it's like an opening statement to you. This is what I would say is the easiest thing that you do, because you're just writing about yourself. It will be very difficult for you not to do well in the personal professional profile, but what I would say is when you write it, give it to your line manager. They're going to be the person that's going to be most familiar with what you do, and therefore they're going to be the person that can turn around and say, oh, well, you've forgotten to mention this. Oh, but what about how you did this? And therefore you'll be able to add in those extra bits that sometimes you take for granted that you do. I've then got an example of a case study. So this is my clinical case study, and I chose to do it on a patient who had an antibody to a high incidence antigen who was going for surgery. So depending on what case study you do will depend on how you outline a case study. If you have a look, I have a presentation on how to format oral presentations, and I would follow a very similar format to that when you write your case study. So this case study, because I'm talking about an antibody that is rare, I start off, and I've done it almost in a separate little paragraph where I've done some research into that antibody and given the examiner's background on that, and I have referenced it. One of the things you have to bear in mind in your portfolio is you have to reference everything. There are 2 different referencing styles you're allowed to use, and I will link the information to that in the description below again. Once I've done that, I start the actual case study, and I start by going through the date, and I'm basically just outlining from start to finish what happened, who dealt with it. So I've got the MLA booked it in, noted that they had an antibody, alerted the BMS on duty, the BMS then came and found me, and then I spoke about my involvement. In these case studies, it is a really, really nice opportunity for you to include pictures that are relevant. So in this one, for example, I had screenshots from the results. Obviously you have to anonymize all patient information, and then I annotated with what each bit meant and how I dealt with that bit, and it just makes it easier for the person reading it instead of having to read a load of text. Like seeing this on the PowerPoint screen, I'm sure it's very boring and a lot for you to look at, so imagine having to go through and mark all of that work. So having something like that really breaks it up. I have not included an example of a managerial case study. I just want to spend a little bit of time explaining what counts as a managerial case study, basically. This is anything that you have done and been a key part of that has been a change in your laboratory. So it could be something simple, like you've trained someone. So say you've helped with someone's training, you can talk about how they came in, what you did for training, what sort of plan you followed, how they progressed, whether it all went smoothly, what went wrong, and it's a nice and easy sort of thing for you to follow. Or in my case, we had a new system upgraded throughout the whole of the hospital, so I spoke about that. I spoke about getting the okay for the system, how we validated it, what went wrong, what went well, and again I included screenshots and stuff of the documentation that we did, and created tables to outline some of the pros and cons. If you are a band 6, obviously it's harder for you to get this information. However, band 6s are often involved in training. When there's validation of new analyzers, often you guys are the ones that help us with running the samples, so it is still definitely possible. This is the part of it that you need to speak to your training person about to ensure that you're included in a project that you can write about for your portfolio. We then move on to the essays. Now for me, and I think for a lot of people, the essays are the scary part, because I haven't written an essay since I was in university. So to have to write out an essay is not something that I enjoyed doing. The other thing to bear in mind is these will have to be referenced. They're 3,000 words. You're expected to use a lot of references. The one bit of feedback that I got about my essays was the first one, they didn't think I'd used enough references. When you're choosing your essays, I think it's important to look at which ones you're choosing and why you want to choose them. So personally, I chose 2 topics that I knew I could do with improving my background knowledge on. However, there were topics there that I could have chosen that I would have found easy, in quotation marks, to complete, because there's stuff that I deal with day in, day out, and therefore they would have been quick for me to write. So I've got an example here where the essay I chose was describe the clinical features and underlying immunological basis of immediate hemolytic transfusion reactions and delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions and the mechanism to prevent them. So whenever you're writing an essay, and I have also done a talk on dissecting essay questions, so I would recommend looking at that. The first thing that you should do is have a look at the question and work out what they want. So they want me to talk about hemolytic transfusion reactions. So the first thing I did was define what a transfusion reaction was, and then what a hemolytic transfusion reaction was. And that's sort of how you would start an essay. To be honest, there's not really much more information I can give you about the essays apart from you just need to do the research. Again, I will put a link to an example of the essay questions that were released this year. I seem to have missed out the part on oral presentation, that's my bad. When you do the oral presentation, they expect that you give them a copy of the slides and notes on what you're going to be presenting. So for me, I did one of the first ever presentations that I recorded on the YouTube, which made it a lot easier for me because I could just go back and look at what I said. And then I got 2 of my senior members of staff to give me the feedback. There's not really much to say about this. The only big thing is you can't choose the same case as the ones you presented in your case studies. Otherwise, it's just you need to be able to reflect on the feedback you're given, and you have to make sure that the information you're presenting in your case study is correct, because they will pick you up on stuff that's not correct. The final thing is the reflection. The reflection doesn't take too long to write, but I found it very difficult because 2,000 words is a lot of words to write when you're reflecting about yourself. So personally, I focused initially on the actual higher specialist work. So I spoke about when I started my revision, why I chose the essay questions I chose, which case studies I had, etc., what I found easy, what I found difficult. And then after that, I spoke about CPD that I had done over the past year. So what talks I'd been on, what extra reading I had done, how this impacted my work. And I also spoke about this YouTube channel and how much that's impacted my CPD. Because every time I do a talk for you guys, I have to spend the time researching that topic and making sure that my misconceptions aren't used to teach others, right? So that still counts as my CPD. So because I have done 26 talks in the past year, I've done more than enough CPD to account for the amount of CPD that I should be doing. So in a way, doing case studies for other people is even more useful than the normal CPD you would do, because you're not only helping yourself get those CPD points, you're also helping others. Once you have done your portfolio, you will submit this. It has to be submitted by the end of May, and then they say it takes about 8 weeks for them to give you your feedback. I think mine took just over 8 weeks. They will then tell you whether or not you've passed. You do not get a grade, but you will get an overview on each section of how well you've done and any feedback they have for you, which is why I knew they weren't happy with the number of references I'd used in my first essay. You're then told that the exams are in September, and you're asked whether or not you want to take them this year or defer till the next year. This is obviously completely up to you. However, if you spent all that time writing up the essays and doing the research for that, logically it would make sense for you to do them as soon as possible while that information is fresh in your head. The exams themselves, there are 4 papers. They have changed again, as I said, they've updated it. So the current structure is you have the first paper, and this is discipline-specific short answer questions. It's only an hour long, and they're questions that focus on problem solving, operational scenarios, analysis of results, or quality control issues. And you'll be expected to answer 4 questions in an hour, and you have to answer all of the questions. Paper 2 is a generic essay question paper, so you get 2 hours for this, and this is the paper that will be on all of the higher specialists. It'll be for all of the candidates, and it won't, regardless of the discipline. So it will continue to cover laboratory management, quality and training issues that prospective Band 7 individuals should be aware of. Candidates will have 1 pre-released mandatory question. So this is a question where they're going to send it out to you, I think they say 6 weeks before the exam roughly, and you have to do your research pre-exam. So you'll be expected to have some form of references. You don't need to know them in great detail, but you would say, I don't know, you would have a rough number of this, and you'd say from this paper or something. You wouldn't have to have all of the different contributors, and not in the same way that you reference everything in your other essays. And they will also be expected to answer 2 further questions from a choice of 4. So in total there are 5 questions, you only have to answer 3. The next paper is discipline-specific essay questions. So again, it's 2 hours, and you're expected to answer 2 out of the 5 questions, and hopefully allowing you to go into greater detail, and hopefully meaning that there'll be some topics that you like. And then the final paper is about case studies. So there are 3 discipline-specific case studies. 1 of them will be pre-seen again, and 2 are unseen. You have 2 hours again to answer these, and the pre-seen will be made available on the IBMS website at least 3 weeks before the first examination day. But in general, to pass, your overall mark, so your mark from all 4 averaged, must be at 50%, with none of the 4 papers scoring below 40%. You are unfortunate and fail, then there are a couple of options for you. If it's only 1 or 2 that you've failed on and the others you've got good marks, then you can bank those marks, and you only have to resit the papers that you haven't done well on. If you've done badly at all of them, then again you can resit them all. If you still fail, then you have to redo the entire qualification, so you'll have to do a new portfolio. If you pass, then that's great. You can now become a fellow, and you have got your higher specialist diploma under your belt, so congratulations. So that's basically the overview of the HSD. Hopefully that's all made sense. If you do have any questions about this, then obviously feel free to contact me. I am actually taking my exams for this in September, so after September I'm probably going to know even more about the exams if that's something that you're interested in. We're now going to move on to the Certificate of Expert Practice, in brackets, online. So these enable biomedical scientists who are at member or fellow levels with at least 2 years post-registration experience looking to specialise in management, training or quality roles to demonstrate their knowledge and skill in these areas and progress on to other IBMS qualifications. These professional qualifications are assessed by reflective learning statements and an online examination. It's available in the following areas: quality management, training, leadership and management, molecular pathology and point of care testing. The courses are 6 modules which are available online using a University Learn site. So the study period for each of the 6 modules is 2 weeks, so that's 6 weeks in total, and the modules are delivered in a student-centered format with continuous assessment to enable students to self-monitor their progress. A tutor-led forum allows students to seek clarification about the course content and explore aspects of the course between themselves and each tutor. The qualifications are assessed through the submission of 2 assessment pieces, one at the midpoint and one at the other end of the course, and an end course online examination. I'm now just going to go through really quickly an outline of each of the course contents. So the quality management course has Introduction to Quality Management, Quality Management Systems, Governance, Risk Management and Compliance, Audit, Conformance Management, Change, and extra information about these can be found on the IBMS website, which is the same for all of these that I'll go through. The training course has Roles and Responsibilities, Professional and Academic Qualifications, Planning and Organising Laboratory Training, Communication, Learning Techniques and Presentation Skills, and Assessment and Evaluation. Leadership and Management course has Introduction to Management, Working in Organisations, Managing People, Finance, Customer Relations, and Change and Projects. Point of Care testing has an Introduction to Point of Care, Quality and Accreditation in Point of Care, Principles of Measurement, Analytic Considerations, Development of a Service Need, Connectivity and Data Management in Point of Care, and Training in Point of Care. You can access the course content through a designated area on the university website, which includes candidate email and discussion forums. The examination of this qualification, your first piece should critically capture how the discussion forums have assisted your learning during the course. Your second should show what you will change in your own practice as a result of doing this course and the steps you'll take to do so. And the online examination lasts for 90 minutes with 42 questions in total, composed of 36 multiple choice and 6 short answer questions covering all of the course modules. So that is basically the overview of the Certificate of Expert Practice online. This is a very useful and quick course to do to inform yourself better on the staples of being in the laboratory. An important thing to note is because you're only getting 2 weeks per module, it is a very intensive course. It's a 12-week course. My apologies, I think I said it was a 6-week course. So yeah, it's a very intensive course. So it's important that you factor that into your considerations before signing up to it, because you want to make sure that you are managing your time effectively. So what next? Once you've completed these qualifications, a lot of what we will do is CPD. However, as previously mentioned, most trusts have management courses to help continue your learning. There is also the STP. I will discuss at a later date if there is interest. Not only that, but there are constantly courses posted on the IBMS website, so it's always good practice to check back and see if there's anything new there. That pretty much wraps up this talk. So I'd like to thank you all for listening, and also for the IBMS for the resources that they provide on their website. As I mentioned before, I will have links to all of the resources for these qualifications in the description box below. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to contact me and I will try to get back to you with further information. Thanks so much for listening. Bye!